For feeling, may I experience these kinds of pleasant feelings, those kinds of pleasant feelings. May I have these kinds of perceptions and ideas in the future, and so on. So there's many different ways of hoping and wishing for one to take shape in the future or to undergo particular experiences in the future. Okay, so in this way there is diversity in the desire and lust regarding the five aggregates. Okay, now we come to a major question, and that is, in what way does the term aggregates apply to the five aggregates? Okay, so now we're really going to hit on the meaning of what exactly is the reference of these five terms that are used to designate the five aggregates. Okay, so the Buddha says here, any kind of material form, whatever, whether past, future, or present, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is the material form aggregate. Then similarly, any kind of feeling, any kind of perception, any kind of mental or volitional formations, any kind of consciousness, whether past, present, or future, internal or external, gross or subtle, inferior or superior, far or near, this is the consciousness aggregate. So here actually the Buddha is using a wider concept simply than the aggregates subject to clinging, but taking all the aggregates, whether they're subject to clinging or not. And so at this point, to get a fuller idea of what's entailed by each of these definitions, you could take up the chart or table that I gave out the other day, or that I prepared the other day and that was given out this morning. Actually, I sent it out the other day. And so here we draw upon a number of other suttas which sort of fill out the reference or denotation of the five aggregates. And so we start with the aggregate of form. And then there is a sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya, 2279, which explains the names of the five aggregates. So it explains the aggregate of form, which is rupa, in terms of another verb which originally has nothing to do with the word rupa, but there's a kind of word play involved here. The verb is rupati. The word rupati means to be injured, to be assaulted, to be molested, to undergo decay. And so the sutta uses that as a basis for a word play. So it says, because it is rupati, because it's subject to assault or it's subject to attack, it's called rupa, form. Is the sound of that vehicle outside? Can the people in the back hear my voice okay? Okay, so this is the wordplay. So the text says that rupati, it is, and I tried to capture that wordplay by using the word deformed as a basis for the word form. So it is deformed, therefore it is called form. Then they said, by what is it deformed? It's deformed by heat, by cold, by the sun, by wind, by flies, mosquitoes, the bites of animals, and so on. So therefore it's called form. So that is a wordplay, but sort of more precisely, when the suttas are explaining the content of the aggregate of form, they explain form as the four great elements and the form derived from or based on the four great elements. So what are the four great elements? Yeah, earth, water, fire, and wind or air. So those are the four primary elements, which according to the Buddhist, philosophical position, represent four modes of matter, or four, maybe you call it four modes of behavior of matter. So from the philosophical angle, the earth element is the aspect of solidity, which is manifest as differing degrees of hardness and softness in material substances. The water element is the element of, maybe you could say, liquidity, with the property of flowing. And it's said that the water element is responsible for the binding together of the particles of matter. Then the fire element is the aspect of heat, the factor that gives some kind of temperature to all material substances. So even when something is cold, when we feel something is cold, it still has some degree of heat, because there's some, well, we would say today, there's some motion of the molecules, and so that is what is generating the heat, even if it's 100 degrees below zero. But the fact that there's some degree of heat there is the presence of the fire element. And then the air element is considered the force of matter responsible for expansion and contraction, or for motion. Okay, so those are the four primary elements, and then based on those, there are varieties of other material phenomena. So the texts speak about, in the form aggregate, color, sound, odor, taste, tactile sensations, the different organs of the body, the sense faculties of the eye, ear, nose, tongue, and bodily sensitivity, and so on. Those are all aspects of form that's derived from the primary elements. Okay, then we come to the feeling aggregate. And so this includes all types of feeling. And then the sutta that gives the derivations of the names of the aggregates explains Vedana, or feeling, on the basis of the verb vedayati, or vedayati. It feels. That which feels is feeling. And then it says, what does it feel? It feels pleasure, it feels pain, it feels the neutral feeling, neither pain nor pleasure. And now in using the English word feeling to explain Vedana, we have to be careful that, that the word feeling here doesn't signify what we would call emotions. You know, like we say, oh, I'm feeling, oh, okay, so he feels love for you, or he feels gratitude, or he feels thankful, or he feels I feel neglected by you, I feel despised by you. Okay, so in English we use the word feeling. Those types of feelings are not what is meant by Vedana, but probably we would say that what we call emotion in English is a rather complex phenomena which has components from several of the aggregates. But rather feeling, in the sense of Vedana, is the very simple, very basic way in which we experience something as being either pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. Some translators use the word sensation for Vedana, but in my opinion that's too narrow, because we usually think of sensation as things that one experiences through the body. Like I have a tingling sensation, okay, in my foot, or a dizzy sensation in the head, or a sensation of maybe a butterfly-like sensation in my stomach, right? Do we use the word sensation in that way? What are some other sensations? Tingling, burning sensation, some other sensations, vibrating sensation. What other sensation can we think of? Throbbing sensation, tingling, throbbing, smooth sensation. But anyway, you can see that they're all pretty much bodily experiences. But if we look at now the definition of feeling in terms of its contents, we have 6 types of feelings. Feeling born of contact through the eye, through the ear, through the nose, through the tongue, through the body, through the mind. So if I see something nice, maybe I come driving along a road and then suddenly turn around a hill and then I can see a very beautiful landscape. So through the eye, I have a pleasant sensation, or rather I have a pleasant feeling. But I wouldn't call that a sensation when you get the feeling of pleasure by seeing something with the eye. Or if I'm listening to some very beautiful music, then I have a pleasant feeling through the ear. But unless if I have the headphone and there's something wrong with the headphone and it's pressing against the ear, then I would say I'm getting a pressing sensation with my ear. But if the earphones are comfortable and I'm listening to the beautiful music, I don't think I would say I'm getting a really pleasant sensation from this music. Even though I have a pleasant feeling. Unless it's something like heavy metal rock, then I might get an unpleasant sensation as, the ghost throbbing, bum, 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 bum. Right? But as far as the actual, the way I respond to the music, that is a feeling, but I don't call that a sensation. Okay, so this is the aggregate of feeling. Then we have the aggregate of perception. And so this is explained, or the word sanya is derived very simply from the verb sanjanati. It perceives, and then that's filled out. What does it perceive? It perceives blue, yellow, red, white. Sometimes the word sanya is translated as idea or ideation, because this is an aspect of sanya. So I say that sanya covers a wide range. So when we have sanya, I would say, operating directly through the 5 physical senses in terms of sight, hearing, smell, and so on. In that case, I would call it perception. But when one is identifying one's perceptions, comparing them, classifying them, and so on, then sanya is turning from perception into ideation. And so we have, according to the contents, 6 classes of perception. That is, perception of forms, sounds, odors, tastes, tactile objects. And then we have perception, this is called perception of dhammas, which we understand to be things that are apprehended solely by the mind without relying upon the physical senses. Maybe the ideas, or maybe the impressions come from the physical senses. For example, if, well, I'm sitting here in Zhuangyan Monastery in Carmel, New York, but I could think back to the Naga tree, remembering the Naga tree, outside the hermitage where I used to live in Kandy in Sri Lanka. So I can see it with my mind's eye. And so I'm getting, it's like a visual impression, but since I'm entertaining it not with my eyes but with my mind, then it's a Dhamma apprehended by the mind. I even remember the fragrance of that tree. It was the most beautiful fragrance in the world, I think. And the interesting thing about the fragrance of the Na tree in Sri Lanka, one gets it early in the morning when one steps out of the cottage, out into the open. Then one gets this, if there's a very light breeze, one gets this really exhilarating, wonderful fragrance. But then when one thinks, oh, that's so beautiful, so wonderful, and one sniffs trying to get it, it's gone. It's so subtle that you can only pick it up when you're not deliberately trying to get it. If you're thinking, I want to get, if clinging enters, I want to get that again, it's gone. But then when you relax and think, I missed it, and then one gives up, then suddenly it comes back. So I can remember all that, but I don't have that fragrance now because we don't have. Maybe we should plant some Na trees around Zhuangyan Monastery. But I don't know if they'll grow outside the tropics. Okay, so this is the 6 classes of perception. The 4th aggregate is the Sankhara Khandha. And we translate this here as the aggregate of volitional formations. But different translators use many different renderings for sankharas. Like one other American monk, Venerable Tanisaro, he uses fabrications in the sense that they fabricate things. Some have used, in fact, I don't even use volitional formations now. I've changed it to volitional activities. And some have used compositional factors, constructive factors, confections. I think early 20th century British translators used confections. So now confections comes to mean sweets that are sold at a candy shop. Because they're things one prepares. Yeah, Venerable Jnanananda, a very intelligent Sri Lankan monk living in Sri Lanka, he uses preparations. Okay, but the definition or the derivation given in the sutta is that this statement is very, very hard to translate accurately or meaningfully into English. What's said is that if I use the word constructions, it would work well. They construct the constructed, therefore they are called constructions, or therefore they are called constructive activities. They construct the constructed, therefore they are called constructive activities. But here we use the connection between the terms and the definition is lost. They give form to the conditioned, thus they are called volitional formations. But the root idea here is that it is the sankharas that shape the human person, because it's the sankharas that generate karma, and it's the karma that gives form or shape to the other four aggregates. In fact, even it's the karma that gives shape also to the volitional activities themselves. So the sankharas shape all five aggregates because it's through karmic activities that we acquire the particular five aggregates that make up our identity. And now when the sutta is explaining what's meant by the sankhara khanda, it uses a different word. It doesn't say there are these 6 classes of sankharas, but rather it says there are these 6 classes of chaitana. And chaitana is what we translate volition. And so the text says that there are 6 classes of volition. Volition regarding form, sounds, odors, tastes, tactile objects, and mental phenomena. So whenever we have any kind of volition, or we might say intention, in regarding any kind of object, that intention or volition constitutes the aggregate of sankharas, volitional activities. So for example, now I have the intention to take a sip out of this herb tea. So even within that general intention, there will take place a number of secondary intentions. So my first intention is the wish to drink the tea, but then how do I get that wish fulfilled? I don't just sit here and say, let me sip the tea, and the cup comes up to my lips, and I sip it. But even without being fully aware of it, I have to make the intention to stretch out my arm. Then I have to make the intention to stop stretching out, because if I just continue like a drunk driver, stretching, 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 I'll knock the cup over and the tea will spill. So I stop, I have the intention, stop stretching. Then I have the intention, close the fingers, get a grip on the cup. So I have to intend to close my fingers around the cup. Then I have to also have the intention, stop the grip, otherwise I'll keep on crushing, crushing, crushing. Well, I won't break the cup, it's too hard, but I'll hurt my hand. Okay, then I have to have the intention, pick up the cup, bring the cup to my lips, stop bringing the cup any closer, otherwise I'll just knock my head back like this. Then I have to have the intention, tilt the cup, open the mouth, take in the tea, taste it. Well, tasting is perception. And then the intention, swallow it. And yet usually when I'm sitting here and talking, or when you're doing any activity and maybe sipping, or drinking some tea or coffee or soda on the side, you're doing all of this, not even aware of all of those intentions. But you can't have those intentions without being aware of them, right? Well, let's say you can't do those activities without having those intentions. But the intentions are taking place so fast that you don't even notice them. But this is one of the things that happens through training in mindfulness. When you undergo like a course in mindfulness meditation, you have to notice every little thing you're doing. So like normally we take a walk, maybe walking around the path of the monastery, talking to a friend, and we're thinking, oh, yesterday, tomorrow I'm planning to do this, I'm going into New York, I have to do this, that. And before you know it, we've gotten from the top of the hill to the bottom of the hill, not aware of a single step. But when you're doing the mindfulness meditation, you have to be aware of lifting the foot, bringing it forward, putting it down, lifting the next foot, bringing it forward, putting it down. And then when you're doing that, you realize that whenever you're walking, what's going by very, very quickly are these intentions. So all of those are intentions belonging to the aggregate of volitional formations. But the most important volitions within this category are the volitions, what we call the ethically or morally significant volitions. That is, the unwholesome volitions, volitions driven by greed, hatred, delusion, conceit, envy, jealousy, and so on. And the wholesome volitions, volitions motivated by generosity, kindness, compassion, humility, patience. Because it's those volitions, the ethically significant volitions, that create karma. And so it's in the aggregate of volitional activities that the Buddha locates the force responsible for, or the factor responsible for creating karma. And that factor is the factor of volition itself. Okay, then we come to the fifth aggregate, which is the aggregate of consciousness, vijnana. And the sutta derives the noun vijnana from the corresponding verb, which is vijanati. So vijanati is actually based on the simpler verb janati, which means to know, and it has a prefix vi, which sometimes gives a more specialized meaning to a verb, like special knowing. Yeah. The root.
Vision. Any
Vis. The English word vision. I don't think so, because I think the root there would be something with V's. So it's not, but it's connected. Janati is etymologically connected with the English word knowledge, which you could see if you take the noun from janati, or actually you could see it even with vijnana, but let's take the noun here is jnana, which in Sanskrit is jnana. And you could see it with no. Even this silent K in English, it becomes silent. And the way they pronounce this word in Sanskrit, it comes out jnana. Though I think correctly it should be jnana. But I've heard it very often pronounced jnana. So you can see that that is where the etymological connection is. I think vision is vis. The Pali word for or verb for to see is pasati. So there could be, from the root pas, there could be a connection that's not so clear between the root pas and vis, from which vision comes. Okay, so vijnana, formal definitions like this are not found in the text, or what I would call conceptualized definitions that we're familiar with from like a textbook on psychology. But the way I understand vijnana, well, first let's before I give my explanation, let's see what the text says. Okay, when explaining the characteristic, it says simply, why is it called vijnana? It says vijanati. It knows, or it cognizes. What does it cognize? Then it says it cognizes sour, it cognizes bitter, it cognizes sweet, it cognizes salty. And now you notice, if you look at the derivation of perception, perception is explained just by distinguishing different types of colors, and consciousness is explained just by distinguishing different tastes. And so I sometimes say that if I were like a university philosophy professor and the Buddha was one of my students, and I gave an exam question, what is the difference between perception and consciousness? And he submitted his answer, well, perception perceives different colors, and consciousness cognizes different tastes. I'd have to say, sorry, Bhante, with all due respects, but I have to give you an F on your answer to that question. Because certainly it's not the case that perception applies only to colors. In fact, if you look at the other sutta, which says 6 classes of perception, there you are, perception of taste. And if you look at the other sutta, which explains 6 classes of consciousness, there you are, eye consciousness. And what is consciousness knowing through eye consciousness? Certainly it's not knowing sour, bitter, sweet, and salty. So Venerable One, please go back and hand in a better paper tomorrow. So this is something of a puzzle. I don't know how to explain this. I like to think maybe some young monk got hold of the transmitted sutta and came up with a brilliant idea. And so he filled in his ideas into the sutta. Okay, so the way I understand the difference between perception and consciousness, that perception is what actually sort of fixes upon the different characteristics of things and identifies them, puts a label on them and sort of selects, separates, isolates, and then uses these labels and designations as a basis for memory, as a basis for conceptual classification. Whereas I understand vijnana, or consciousness, to be, maybe I would call it the light of awareness, which arises based on each of these 6 sense bases, and it opens up that whole domain, that entire objective domain that corresponds to the type of consciousness. So I consciousness is awareness opening up based on the I base, or the I faculty, which opens up all visible forms to awareness, or to knowledge, or to perception. Ear consciousness is that awareness that opens up based on the ear, and that opens up all sounds to discernment, or to knowledge, and so on with each of the other 5 senses. And mind consciousness is that kind of awareness that opens up the entire domain of ideas, concepts, judgments, images, projections, plans, desires, memories, that opens up all of those inner mental processes to cognition. Okay, at this point I could ask whether we have any questions on anything covered so far today. Stephen? I can hear you, though there's a little bit of competition.
Okay, if you could say a few more words, going back to Vedana, about the third quality of Vedana, neither pain nor pleasure, because I've always wondered why it's typically rendered with this somewhat awkward phrasing as opposed to just saying neutral. Okay.
He's asking why the third type of Vedana is rendered by this clumsy phrase, neither painful nor pleasant, rather than simply calling it neutral feeling. I don't know why that particular label for it came to be. Maybe the purpose is simply to show that it's a feeling which is not pain, not pleasure. Though sometimes, if you were present for the Abhidhamma session, you weren't here for the Abhidhamma? Oh, I thought you were, I'm sorry. But the Abhidhamma uses another word, another term. It uses, which is a little confusing, it uses the expression upekkha vedana, which upekkha normally means equanimity as a positive or beautiful mental factor, the state of mental balance. But in regard to feeling, it uses upekkha to designate this neutral feeling. And some other, I think it's in the commentaries, that neither painful nor pleasant feeling is called Majjhima Vedana. Majjhima means madhyata, in the middle, the feeling in the middle. That would be the neutral. Okay, Richard?
Yeah, I have a couple questions. First, form. Why is rupa translated as form when the simile is a lump of foam, and the characteristic is, can be deformed, both of which sound like it's matter that can be switched into a number of different forms. And for instance, the condition is nutriment, so it's kind of like a bolus in your throat or something. Right? It sounds to me like it has more to do with simply undifferentiated matter than with the shape implied by form.
I know.
Right?
Yeah.
What is there? Why is form used rather than matter?
Okay. This is a good question. So the question is, why is the English word form used for rupa, whereas it seems from other aspects of the explanation that matter would be more precise? In fact, the way rupa is actually used, what you say is, in a sense, correct, that it's closer to matter, except that there's two ways in which the word rupa occurs. And I think maybe this explains the choice of form. That rupa is also used to designate the class of objects that correspond to the eye and that are apprehended by eye consciousness.
Okay.
And so it seems that rupa, the older meaning, was things that are seen. And then it came to be given an extended meaning to apply to everything that has some kind of, physical existence or material existence. And so some translators use the word matter. I used to use material form. I think I switched over to form for a very simple, pragmatic reason, that in